Hello, everybody. This is Serena from DevPost. I am joined by quite a few folks over at FNS at the USDA. We've got Whitney Peters, Ed Harper, and Timothy Weplow. We're just going to give folks a couple of minutes to get logged on here, so we're going to go on mute and wait for just a couple minutes, so stay with us. If you are watching and you have some questions that you'd like to post in advance, you can do so by clicking the little icon at the top right of your screen that looks like 9 little squares together into one big square, like a little app center type of a thing. If you click on that, it's going to open up a little QA box, and you'll be able to access the Q&A right there. So go ahead and add your questions now, and we will start in just a couple of minutes. Okay, so we've got some viewers on, and I want to be cognizant of your time. We really appreciate you guys coming and sharing a little bit of your time with us and getting some questions answered. I am Serena Petruska. I'm the project manager at DevPost, and I am joined by a few folks from the school meal program staff at FNS, Whitney Peters, Ed Harper, and Timothy Weplow. They're going to be giving you a little bit of information that we didn't cover on the last webinar that we did, and also going to be spending a good deal of time answering questions and answers. So quick mini tutorial of the Google Hangouts platform for those who haven't used it yet. To get up to real time, because you might be watching this in delay, just go ahead and click the cursor at the bottom of your screen and drag it all the way to the right. That is going to get you up into real time. You can also go back in time, so we're broadcasting live, but we're recording as well. If you want to ask a question, you can do so by opening up the questions module. It may have opened for you when you opened this broadcast. If it didn't, there is a set of 9 little squares that makes up the larger square. That's kind of the Google Hangouts apps. If you click on that, you're going to see the QA option, and you can go ahead and open that up to post a question. Like I said, we're going to be answering questions at the end of the webinar, so go ahead and put them in there. We're going to be answering them in the order that they were received. If we don't know a question, we will look that up, because obviously you guys know there's a lot of policy in here. We want to make sure that we get the answers right for you. So we'll look that up and get back to you as quickly as possible. If we are not able to answer a question during the webinar, we will go ahead and answer that after the fact, and we'll make sure that all of these questions do get answered, because we know they're very important for you guys. So, with no further ado, I am going to hand it over to the FNS staff to through the little bit to Q&A and give you guys all a moment to start putting your questions in.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is Timothy Weplow. Just want to give everyone a heads up. During this webinar, we will review the judging criteria, which is the current slide. We'll also provide an example of an edit check. We'll point contestants towards research from the White House Social and Behavioral Sciences team that may help you in your design. And we'll conclude with questions and answers. The judges will be looking for attractive and interactive UX, intuitive question flow logic, and data capture features. Submissions must also meet the user testing and feedback requirement, so designers and hackers can gather initial data on their UX to better inform their designs. With these judging criteria in mind, we would like to remind contestants that we are not expecting or holding you to become experts in our program rules. We recognize and appreciate the efforts that you have been putting on household eligibility scenarios. While it still remains an important judging criteria, we are not holding you to perfection under every possible exception case. So just to go over these once more, I'll read them aloud. We have the judging criteria of UX and design appeal, effectiveness and efficiency of behavioral prompts, implementation of form requirements, application code documentation and implementation, and demonstration of testing and debugging. Our next slide covers edit checks. Now, one example of an edit check could be for ensuring accuracy of the total reported household income. We used the paper prototype's income section as a visual aid for this slide. Please note that we intentionally put little effort in making this visually appealing. It is only to illustrate the point of the edit check and not an example of our expectations of UX design. Prompting an applicant to confirm the total household income after completing the income questions may help people to recognize and correct errors in their income reporting. Contestants should view edit checks as an opportunity to communicate with applicants by providing feedback and allowing applicants to confirm the information they've entered. We aren't sure what best common denominator is when providing a summation of household income, but we encourage you to rely upon your expertise or your review of literature to inform your decisions about this and other aspects of your design. Be sure to explain any research or reasoning behind your choices within your submission video so that we know and understand the context of your design choices. Just to highlight here, I'd like to point out that these images are rather crude, and we did that intentionally. This is the quality of paper submissions that districts and schools receive. It's handwritten, and so this is something that you guys will have to consider when creating the digital design. So here's an example of some behavioral components and research that we would like to point you all towards. So the research by the White House Social and Behavioral Sciences team has shown that confirmation prompts at the beginning of a form are a promising approach to reducing financial self-reporting errors. The source of this is from the Social and Behavioral Sciences team 2015 annual report. You can read more about this and other SPST findings within their annual report, which we will provide the link to after the webinar. Now we're ready for Q&A.
All right. Thank you so much, Tim. So everyone, as we discussed, it's time for Q&A. We know we told you we would give you a lot of time for this. I know there's lots of great questions out there. So we're going to go ahead and take that now. I'm going to move it to the next slide that we've got here just so we have this important information, which we'll go over at the end again up. Remember that the deadline to enter this competition is March 1st at 5 p.m. Eastern, and you do have to enter online at lunchux.devpost.com. I know you all know that already, but just to put it out there. So with no further ado, we're going to go ahead and start answering questions. I see that we have quite a few in already. I'm going to go ahead and answer from the top in the order that they were received. So the first question is for the F&S team. This question is, how do households usually get the form? Is it sent home? Is it emailed out? Or does it really differ in between districts?
So here at F&S, we agree that it definitely differs by districts. The paper form is often sent home by schools to households. and sometimes notification of available websites if the districts do elect to participate in some form of online or electronic application.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. All right. Next question is, how do schools usually adapt or change the application? This is coming from Cody Landstrom, and I'm assuming that he means the current applications that are out there, but maybe we could also talk about if there's anything that we expect to happen from this version of the prototype as well. And for everybody viewing, just hold tight. Like I said before, the FNS team does need to make sure that they're giving you the best possible answers, so sometimes they're going to be taking a few moments to just look up and verify the answers before they broadcast.
So for this question, we assume that what's being asked here is what elements of the application are changed. Since this is our first electronic prototype, we don't exactly know how school districts or schools themselves will modify this application. However, we anticipate at a minimum they will change simple things like adding in their school name and contact information.
Great, thank you, Tim. All right. Our next question is, can children fill out an application? Does it necessarily require an adult signature or an adult to complete it? I know when I was a kid, I filled out most school-related forms and just had my mother sign it.
So the application form is intended to be filled out by adults in the household, and regardless of which individual is filling it out, whether it's somebody from outside of the household if they sought help, the form has to be signed by an adult household member to be valid. And so at the very least, regardless of who's filling out the form, an adult household member has to be involved in the process and has to sign off on whatever is written on the form.
Awesome, thanks for that answer. All right, next question is coming from Nicolette. This question is, what is the reason for a native desktop application? We know that most lower income households are more likely to have smartphones, but not desktop laptops or computers. And the FNS team, let me know if you guys would like me to handle this one. I'm happy to.
Yeah, Serena, I think that sounds great.
Okay, awesome. So Nicolette, your question is fantastic, and it's a very good one. Really what we're looking to do here is give one standard measure to the output of the form. We did state that it had to be online. Obviously, we know, as we've mentioned before, that mobile adaptable versions of the form are going to be great, and we definitely are interested in that. But in order to make it fair for everybody and have just one standard of measure across the board, we did want to just require that that it be viewable in a desktop version. We definitely are interested in having things that are also responsive and are variable in size and layout. But since we're asking a lot of you guys to really kind of rethink the behavioral aspects of this form, we didn't want to throw that in as well. We wanted to really make sure that we were focusing on getting the great behavioral prompts and those things out as the forefront goal. So it's definitely something that could be done down the line, but it's just not something that we've chose to focus on for this first part of this new prototype. All right, next question. Do contractors, like freelancers, count as self-employed? The example given is like Lyft drivers. And this is a very good question, and it might take a couple of moments for this to be answered. So while we're answering that, I also want to answer one from Daryl about this webinar that came a couple questions down, which is, can we get a copy of this PowerPoint you presented? Yes, Daryl, absolutely. So this is actually going to be videotaped, and you can go back at any point and watch the video. And if needed, we can certainly post the slides as well. So if the video doesn't suffice for you, please let us know, and we can put the slides up as well. But the video will be posted right after the event.
We agree, Serena, this is a pretty strong question. We're going to save this one for a written response after the webinar.
Okay, awesome. So Edward, we will get back to you about what exactly the definition of the self-employed folks is. All right. Next question up. What are the typical demographics of someone who fills out this application? Sex, age, typical time spent in school, etc.
Yeah. So our programs reach about 30 million children each year, of which about 2/3 qualify for free and reduced price benefits. The people who use our programs and rely on them on a daily basis are a cross-section of our entire society. I think it would be a mistake to characterize them one way or another. Obviously, demographic differences exist between states and communities, and that's part of the reason we give state and local officials some flexibility to make modifications. They know their audience, and they know what their needs are. But in general, it's a very diverse population that we serve.
All right, got it. So unfortunately, we can't be super specific, but I hope that that is helpful for you guys. Next question up. Can adults estimate monthly income if it is irregular? Tips, self-employment, etc.? And while the FNS team is deliberating on that, I am going to answer another of Daryl's questions. He's asking, have there been any submissions as of yet? And the answer is yes, Daryl, there have been submissions. We are reviewing them as they come in and alerting the submitters of any things that they need to change in order to be eligible based on the rules. And we will open the submission gallery once the submission period ends.
Serena, we're going to take this one as well with a written response.
Very good. All right, so Edward, we will get back to you on the adults estimating monthly income if it is irregular and get you the best response to that just as soon as we can. All right, our next question is, I am assuming the entire source code has to be open sourced. Does this mean we cannot use any proprietary libraries? I'm going to go ahead and take this, FNS team. So this is a great question. The answer is yes, everything that you provide as part of your submission needs to be open sourced under the MIT license as we've described in the rules. It doesn't necessarily mean that you cannot use any proprietary libraries. What it means is that anything that you use needs to be able to be open source. So either you've met the licensing requirements of whatever those libraries are, and they allow for open sourcing the material, or if they do not, then you have not used those. So you need to own all elements of your submission, have the rights to use them, and also have the rights to put them out in an MIT license. So please do keep an eye on that as you're choosing what type of code to put forth. All right, now we're running a little bit low on questions. I've got a handful in backup that people have sent to me on Slack or via email. But if you have a burning question, please go ahead and enter it. We are going to be keeping on here just as long as we have questions, so don't be shy. Next question up is, aside from the obvious, not listing all income or household members or not correctly noting assistance programs, any other main areas of the form that we should be providing extra help for?
Okay, so for this question, we're really relying on the designer's expertise and their resumes for design, for form design, excuse me. But we would like to refer back to the third and fourth slide within the PowerPoint presentation of this webinar for the edit checks and the behavioral science prompts. Both of those should give you an idea of potential areas for providing extra help, but beyond that, we're really looking forward to whatever sources you may determine are helpful.
All right, great, thank you. Next question is one that came in via email. It says, can you explain what the phrase, quote, supported by household income, end quote, specifically what does supported mean exactly? Providing example scenarios would be most helpful. And FNS team, I think that, that this person is referring to a note on the solver packet page where we state that, let me actually just look it up exactly. We state that the definition of a household member is anyone who is living with you and shares incomes and expenses, even if not related, and even if they do not have income of their own. This does not include people who live in the household but are not supported by the household's income and do not contribute to your household income. I think it's that second sentence that's confusing this person.
Yes, so that's probably going to be a very limited category of individuals. We expect that in most cases, people who are living together share resources with one another. The reason we have that exception is suppose you have, say, a boarder or somebody who's paying rent, or maybe you have a grandmother or something who's living on a pension or some other thing and basically supports herself, but otherwise is kind of an autonomous unit. Again, we recognize that these situations are probably relatively rare, but we wanted to make sure that that distinction was out there so that if you had somebody in the household whose resources were in no way accessible to the rest of the people in the household, or they're just not at all connected, that they weren't being counted as part of that household for their income and number of household members.
Awesome, thanks for that. Okay, our next question is something that I'm going to handle on this end. Comes from Nicolette. Question is, if we try to get our project in a little early, say mid to late February, is that enough time for you to provide feedback so we can tweak it? That's a really good question, and as I've noted to quite a few of you in personal emails before, we are going to be, the DevPost team will be reviewing the submissions as they come in for eligibility. So what that means is that we're going to be looking through the rules and comparing basically what you have sent to us with what is in the rules. So just to go through here, we're going to be saying, does it meet all these requirements? The applications must collect all the required fields, so we'll do a quick check through, see how many you've included, if not all. They must be open source and provided under the MIT license. They need to include a way to capture, save, and export the responses. And they need to include user prompts to assist with the form completion. So we're going to look through your submission materials, make sure that your applications do all of these things. In addition, we're going to make sure that you've completed all of the required elements. So that includes the demo video, which is that step-by-step explanation of your application, walking through the UX, how it reduces error, etc. We're going to make sure you've got an image or two up of your design. We're going to be looking for that repository link so that we can actually see that you have open sourced your code. And we're also going to be looking for an application link to make sure that we can actually click through your whole site and make sure that it works for judging and testing. And then finally, proof of user testing. We are going to be taking a look to make sure that you have included in some way the user testing validation, basically. And so as we mentioned before, you can do that in a couple ways. You can provide feedback via the feedback questionnaire. You can have your friends and family and whoever is going to be testing for you take a look at that, and you can upload that in the upload a form area of the submission form. You can also put feedback into your video. You can talk about the feedback in your text description. We're not being too rigorous on how you give that back because we know that there might be different variations based on the feedback that you got. So we're going to be checking for those things to make sure all the elements are there and to make sure that you've met the basic requirements. If you haven't met those, then we will shoot you an email letting you know what is missing and what you need to do and when you need to do it by. As far as how long that process takes, we really aim to review things in about 24 hours to 48 hours. We know that you guys really need feedback quickly so you can make changes before the deadline, so we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible within a couple of days. Okay, next question.
Serena, actually, we'd like to return to Edward's previous question on infrequent income.
Great.
So households are required to report income that is reflective of their current income level. And so that would generally mean the gross income received by the household before deductions, typically in the current month or the month prior, or based on a projection of what the household believes it's going to accrue in that month. That said, if the income that they're receiving the month they're applying for is significantly higher or lower than usual, if it doesn't fairly represent the household's typical income and circumstances, then the household can work with the local officials at their school to project something that is more in line with what the household would expect to receive on a regular basis, because we recognize that sometimes there's fluctuations. There could be a one-time payment coming from any number of sources, and if you annualize that, it would show a lot of extra income for the household that doesn't actually exist, and we are sensitive to that. And so they do have that option to reach out to their local determining officials to report something that is more representative of their real-world circumstance.
Fantastic, thank you. Oh, and I just answered that backwards. Sorry about that. Okay, next question that I answered out of turn is from Kumar. It says, do we also have to build a database / backend which collects the form data, or do we just have to do the UX of the form only? It's a great question. You do need to create some way to save and export the data. So I'm going to flip forward to the requirements of each application, and if you look at the third bullet here, it says include a way to capture, save, and export the responses. So this does not need to be a database that will sort the data or do anything outside of these things: capture, save, and export. There may be modifications made to this prototype by each individual school, or even before we put it out to schools in terms of the database and what it does. But for the purpose of this competition, you just need to be able to show us that you are saving and have an ability to export the responses that you receive. That's about it. It doesn't need to be any more sophisticated than that. All right, next question. All right, this also comes from Edward. Says, in the solver pack, you've stated frequency of household income as an impact on eligibility. If someone has 2 jobs or benefits with different payment frequency, how is this reported?
What we'd like to see in your submissions is that the application gives the applicant an opportunity to submit those 2 different income sources with 2 different payment frequencies.
Great. So just a reminder that this is not, a one-to-one digitalization of the form that is open now. We're looking for ways to do it better so that things like this can be done in a straightforward way. Okay, let's see here. Got a question from Ali. Question is, the edit check example that was shown earlier in this presentation prompts the user to verify that the entered income, biweekly or monthly, is what the user really wanted to enter. If correct, we don't necessarily need to create a new total income field.
We'd like to clarify that a total income field is not required within the application. And also, returning to the edit check example, the weekly and monthly summation that's provided within the example is not a requirement. It was just used to illustrate the example of the edit check.
Got it. And Tim, just to clarify, the important pieces here is that are that all of the types of income and the frequency are denoted, not necessarily the overall total. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Great. Okay, next question. An adult has to complete the form. Is this adult assumed to be living in the household, or could it just be someone that's helping, like a preparer?
The adult has to be a household member in order to sign the application.
Perfect. Okay. Next question is one that I received via email earlier this week, or excuse me, late last week. It says, should we take into account students who might complete this form on their own? For example, a 16 or 17-year-old living on their own, or an 18-year-old who is maybe dropped out and is now returning to high school? Or should the form assume that is an adult non-student who is completing it?
I mean, if the child's on their own.
I would imagine that this is an edge case, so it might take team just a couple of moments. Just a reminder to those that are viewing, any questions that you have, go ahead and stick them into that question box. There's nothing that is a stupid question. We want to make sure that you guys are clear on things.
Serena, we recognize this question as pretty complicated, and we want to make sure we provide an accurate response. So we're going to take this one in writing after the webinar.
Very good. Sounds good. All right. Next question in the queue is more logistical. It says, what happens to our entries after the competition? So FNS, I do want to push this one over to you guys. What is the plan after the competition ends? And while we're waiting, I am currently out of questions, which is no good at all. So anybody who has a question, please feel free. Type it in right there for me, or clarification of earlier questions as well. It's totally appropriate.
All right. First, we believe, and Serena, please correct us if we're wrong, but each of the entries will be posted to the DevPost website. And second is FNS will then develop a prototype that will borrow the best elements from all of the entries within the competition.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. So at this point, I am open to any questions that have people haven't asked. Be looking for those. I think we have gotten through all the questions that came in through email. I'm just going to check Slack real quick here, make sure there's nothing else. Oh, here's one. Okay. Says, is it okay to test with a Chrome browser, or should we test it with others too? That's a very good question. We do not have a requirement on which browsers you need to be able to support with your application, only that it needs to run for a desktop browser. That said, it would, do you probably a good service to test on the top browsers that are out there, so Chrome, IE, Safari, and also Firefox or Mozilla. You aren't going to be graded or judged differently whether you do that or not, but it is something that, just as a typical QA thing, I would recommend. All right, next question. I assume the UX we will create will eventually be given to a developer. What are the typical skill sets of those developers? I'm going to try to take this FNS, but please let me know if you have anything to add here. I don't think that those people have been specifically determined yet, and that is why one of the judging criteria, which we'll pop back to here real quick, here we go, is the application code, documentation, and implementation. So really what we're looking for is, that you've coded this in a way that another person with your similar skill set or slightly less potentially could understand. We know that there might be some questions that folks have, and we'll work through that. But just use good practice when you're documenting your code, and we should be in good shape for that. All right, next question. Can you define adult in terms of age? For example, the form asks to enter the last 4 of the Social Security number of the primary wage earner or other adult household member. I'm guessing it does not have to be the same adult signing the form. FNS team, just let me know when you're ready with that one.
I mean, we have not specifically set an age on adult beyond the standard legal definitions. Typically, an adult is somebody who's not a minor, and so in most contexts, that's going to be ages 18 or older. That said, we would expect that even if you did have a household member, occasionally you find 18 or 19-year-olds in high school systems, or sometimes even a little bit older, we would expect that the form would still be signed by that individual's parents or guardians, as the case may be. And so in most cases, while adult would be a standard of 18 years or older, there's some degree of common sense here, or in terms of what we would expect as far as the individuals actually signing the application are concerned.
All right, wonderful. Okay, we have another question from Edward. He says, is there any interest in designing the UX for configuring the application with values like school district name or state SNAP program name? So I think what Edward is asking here is should the form, or are we looking for the form to auto-populate these things or be easily configured with these things? And from a rules perspective, that's not something that we have required or that we've called out specifically to be rated higher based on the judging criteria, but I'll let FNS explain or give any input on if that's something that they are interested in general.
We are interested in high levels of customization so that the districts and states can adopt and then adapt the prototype.
Awesome. So it sounds like if you're interested in doing that, going above and beyond, you are most welcome to, but it is not a requirement of this competition. All right, we've got about 17 minutes left, and I have room for more questions. So anyone who has a question, please feel free to post it. And FNS team, if you have had any questions come to you directly, please feel free to shout those out as well. I think I have them, but just in case. All right, while we're waiting, I do have one other one from Edward. It says, are there web services or web service integrations that can't be used in the application, say a Google sign-in or Dropbox? So I think what you're asking is, are there any that we're not interested in having included, that we don't want included specifically? If I am understanding that correctly, then I believe that the answer is no. We don't have any specifications around which web services or web service integrations couldn't be used. I think we're open to any that you have license to use based on being able to, include it in an MIT license through your total application. So as long as you're good there, that should be fine. But FNS, if you have anything to add to that answer, please feel free to shout it out.
Nope, we think you covered it.
Great. Okay, Ali has a question. Any recommendation on the length of the demonstration video for the submission? 5 minutes or longer, etc. Ali, that is a wonderful question. As someone who gets to have the supreme joy of viewing lots and lots of submission videos during our eligibility checks, I would say that the shorter the better as far as making sure that you can actually demonstrate what your application does and keep folks' attention. Remember that judges are going to be reviewing these as well, and even the best person, might not be able to keep total attention at minute 17. So as quickly as you can explain why your application meets all the requirements and what cool new interfaces or user prompts or user experience elements are used in your application, the better. And please feel free to include narration, subtitles, call-out text, whatever you need to do to make sure that the judges really get a good understanding of what you've created and worked so hard on. Okay. So I am out of questions on this side. We'll wait for a few more to come in. I'll just ask Tim again real quickly. Did the FNS team get any additional questions in directly, or have you sent those all to me already?
Serena, thanks for asking. We don't have any at this time.
Perfect. Okay, no problem. Just want to make sure that we've gotten all of those speedy before the webinar questions into the queue. All right, everyone, so we'll hang out for a few more minutes. If no one has any other questions, then we may end a couple of minutes early, but we'll certainly hang on the line for about 5 more minutes or so, just in case any other questions come up. The image of the web-based form design, does it have to be a wireframe, or any requirements about that we should know about? Great question. There are not any additional requirements around that other than the fact that it needs to showcase your design. So you could do a wireframe if you wanted. You could take a screenshot of an element that you thought is particularly unique to your submission. You can also upload many images. It doesn't have to be one. I don't think there is a limit to how many that you can enter. I've seen submissions come in with lots of things. So just feel free to make sure that whatever images you put up are good depictions of your entry. Cody has another question for us. Can we include additional content in the experience? That is a really good question. And Cody, it would be very helpful if you could give an example of what additional content you're thinking of, because I think that what that content is might change what the answer is from FNS is, but I'm not 100% sure. So FNS, if you have thoughts on that already, feel free. And Cody, if you can give us a little bit more clear scenario of what you're thinking of, that would be really helpful.
Serena, we agree. Cody's question is intriguing, and we'd like some clarification in order to be more accurate in our response.
Perfect. All right, Cody. Well, we will close this for now, but please write back in with a potential scenario that maybe you were thinking of, and we'll be happy to dive into that. All right. In the meantime, another question from Edward. Are there any accessibility concerns that we should take into consideration? This is government-related, sort of. This is government-related, sort of. So is it required to adhere to the ADA? That is a good question. The rules do not specify that you must adhere to the ADA standards, but FNS, please feel free to note anything that you've seen done in best practice or that you would encourage folks to consider.
All right. Edward, that is something that FNS will have to consider after receiving all of the entries and developing the prototype. So that's not something that you need to worry about.
All right. Okay, we have an example back from Cody. So he said an example for additional content might be having content around nutrition on the site after the survey. So maybe it's talking about the types of nutrition coming from a school lunch or a school meal. Cody, you've stumped us. No, I'm just joking. I'm sure the FNS team is simply deliberating. Oh, and he has another example, just to put that up. Another example is based on someone's household size and income, would something that highlighted healthy recipes that fit their budget be of interest? It's a very interesting idea.
Cody, we really like your examples, but we agree here that this really isn't the function of the application to provide these additional sources of information.
All right, so it looks like this might not be the best place, but I do think those are interesting things and potentially could be additional apps that you create that folks could use outside of this application. Certainly love to see that happen. All right, we've got just a few minutes left, so if we have any other questions that people are dying to get answered, please post them now. Just another reminder on what we're going through here. So this whole webinar is going to be posted up on the Google Hangout link that you received, and we'll also be posting it on the competition webpage, so you can refer back to it. We will also be taking a look through any of the questions that were not answered in real time and making sure that we have answers for those after the webinar is posted. Also want to remind you guys that we are within a month. Today is February 1st. Our deadline to enter is March 1st, 2016, 5 p.m. Eastern. After that point, you will not be able to edit or enter anymore. So we really recommend that you start your draft early so that there are no left field questions that I didn't know they were going to ask that, and then you're stumped and don't make it in on time. That is the worst. We don't want to have that happen. So please start your draft. You can save it incomplete. You can say, hey, this is a draft, and put in placeholder information in all the required fields, even if you need to. Big thing we want to make sure that you do is see that submission form and get familiar with it, so nothing is a surprise at the end. All right, so I'm still dry on questions, so I think we're going to go ahead and close this up just a couple of minutes early. But I do really want to thank the folks over on the FNS team who have been working very hard to answer all of your questions. And oh, I have one more. Okay, last one, Edward. Okay, Edward has one last question. It says, the signature part. Should we just fake it or follow its pretty standard and use a faux generated signature that takes in name, birthday as a sort of saying, I am who I say I am? So I think, Edward, what you're saying is we're wanting to know how to electronically gather a signature, since that is something that is not as direct electronically. What I know on that, and I'll let FNS expand on this, is that we haven't specified that you need to use any federally approved signature technique. And I assume, and I think FNS will let me know if I'm off track here, but I assume that the signature verification portion will be more fully expanded in the prototype that is derived from these entries. But FNS team, please let me know if there's more to consider there.
So, in order to be valid, the application must have an adult signature. It should be the adult's legal name, and they should also provide the date on which they've signed it. But you know, all of our current prototypes currently just have a box for printed name and signature. Obviously, since they're not writing on an online application, that can just be a signature box. But I believe previous guidance has been provided on this point.
That's so correct. We have received this question previously, and we'll refer back to that answer and provide a follow-up written response to make sure that we are providing consistent responses.
Perfect. Thanks, Tim. I appreciate that. All right, and with that, I'm gonna close down our Q&A. I really appreciate everybody who took the time to stop by and ask questions. We really have enjoyed talking with you all and supporting you through this. We are available to ask questions to in a variety of outlets. You can post on the Slack channel, and I will shepherd your questions across to the FNS team. You can post on the discussion board. You can email support@devpost.com. So there's no reason not to ask a question if you have one. We would love to hear what you're thinking, what you're struggling with, and help you as much as we can. Great big thanks to the FNS team supporting this and answering all of your questions. And we are very excited to see all of the entries that come in. We can't wait, really, we can't. So submit early, let us see what you're working on, and happy hacking, happy coding. Thanks, guys.